It's time now for the Gem Young Wealthcast. Brought to you by Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, a family-owned independent insurance and financial planning agency since 1947. Now, from their studio on Star Center Drive in Canfield, Ohio, here's the host of your program, Leo Daprile.
Welcome to the Gem Young Wealthcast. This is Leo Daprile. Well, this is our fourth part in our series where we talk with our clients about what we do, what their life's been like in retirement. We've had Gary Wakeford on. He's still working, eligible to retire, but he's working the work optional lifestyle. We had Randy Reese on, who retired approximately a year and a half ago, and he's still figuring out what his retirement looks like. And then we had Stephanie Schuler on, and she's been retired about 10 years, and she's single. So we had different people with different life stages handling their retirement very differently. So with that, I have with me Stephen, my son Stephen. We're going to talk about this a little bit, recap some of the, not only their personal experiences, but how that plugs into how we work and what we do. And hopefully we'll give you some practical tools and tips on how this can help you either achieve that work optional lifestyle, or if you're already retired, maybe some changes and modifications that might be helpful to you as well. So hello, Stevie.
Hey, Dad. Thanks for having me here. It's good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. Thanks. So when we talk to Gary, we all love Gary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we love all of our clients, actually.
For sure.
But what's interesting about him, and I think the common theme is that as our clients, just because they're moving on, either aspiring for the work optional lifestyle or achieving it and choosing to work, it creates a lot of planning dynamics for us, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Yeah, I would think that. Yeah, of course it does. Of course, there's always, when people are recently retired, there's, I always like to say the math of it, right? What do the numbers work out to? This, that, or the other thing. But really, so much retirement is a lifestyle change, right? What is going on with people mentally? Are they prepared for this next step? Do they think that they're prepared? Do they just want to disengage from their current profession, as you say? Do they just not like their job? Or are they really done working and ready to full, quote unquote, retire, right? I think it's a very interesting emotional journey that is unique for every client.
The example that I was using on the other three podcasts, where when you're in the accumulation phase, we've all seen the commercials that have the gray-haired couple that's tan on a bicycle with palm trees behind them.
Yeah.
And that's how retirement gets sold to a lot of people. And part of the purpose of doing the series that we did is it's not that way. It's not always hunky-dory, right? Those are my words the last 3 weeks that I've been using.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's real challenges with it. There's sometimes heartache with it, hardships with it, and I'm not talking financial necessarily.
Right.
So and that's where when we go back, and especially when we're meeting with a client for the first time, we do a lot of goal planning, and we call that what's important to you. So, why don't you give a little bit of what that is and what it means and why that's relevant?
Yeah, I think goal planning is important. It's one of the exercises I always say, particularly when we have retirees or soon-to-be retirees come in and they're looking to do some financial planning work. I always say that you're going to struggle with one of the two sections, quote unquote, that we're going to ask you, right, to respond to. And the component number one is, what are your goals, right? What do you want with your life? Right? What are some things you want to achieve? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And number two is just, what do you got? Right. And that's the more like analytical side. Like, what are your investment assets, pension income, assets, liabilities, so on and so forth. And some people really have a clear vision of what they want to do. But the idea of gathering all this data, and it stresses them out, and going searching and looking through statements and going online. And it seems like it seems like most people, not everybody, some people the whole thing's a headache. Some people, the whole thing is just something they've had in the back of their head anyway. But most people, I would say, struggle with putting into words, into numbers, and bringing what they want to do, what they want their life to look like, into words and numbers and actionable items that you have to plan for. I think that takes a lot of soul searching for people, and it's a tough thing that we ask our clients to do, but it's important, right? It's important that, much like, we've all worked in our careers, right? And we all understand being goal oriented and, naming a goal, doing a SMART goal or whatever is one of the most effective ways to achieve it, telling people about your goal. But sometimes something so personal as this can be challenging for people, right? It pushes their emotions. It pushes them mentally in a different way, but ultimately it's a good exercise, right? Again, step one to achieving anything is set a goal, right? Figure out what you're trying to achieve, and then, let the plan come in after that. So,
and to just expound on that is we have a lot of professionals that do goal planning in their professions all the time, but they don't really think of ever doing personal goal planning. And that's why we don't call it personal goal planning. It just sounds corporate. That's why we call it what's important to you, because now that draws them back into what their value system is. And to your point on, we talk corporately of SMART goals and all that other stuff, but what we work with our clients on is really getting specific to what a goal is. And that's part of where we spend so much time up front, is helping people figure out exactly what that means. For instance, the conversation, one of the common themes of somebody is, I want to have enough income during retirement. Okay, what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. Until we dig down to it, and not just what's your budget, what it is what are you aspiring to do? You have it when people think they're going to disengage or retire, they have a thought in their mind already of what that looks like, but it's a thought. It maybe is a picture.
Yeah.
But it's not what their life will be like every day. So we spend an enormous amount of time with people till we can get to that as specifically as we can get to it. Because once they make that move, that's what it really becomes. We know that. We've been doing that for 40 years. We see that, right? So in that vein, then, by helping them specifically articulate it, even if in the background we're doing maybe a SMART goal process, we're not really sitting there with a piece of paper saying, here's the elements of a SMART goal, right?
Of course not. Yeah, no. We need to be more human than that, I think. Right. That's a little corporate-y, as you alluded to.
Right. Because, you've heard me say this complaint, and through the years we see, I call it the Walmarting of money management and the Walmarting of financial planning, where somebody comes out with a program and it's good for 10 million people. And it's couldn't be any further from the truth. So what they default to is the amount of money somebody might need at a point in time, without their really knowing whether that's a relevant number or not. We've seen that number way too low. We've seen that number way too high.
Yeah. I think back to forever ago, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, or just even perusing it, and I had an issue with one of the headlines, and it was, "Is $1 million still enough to retire?" was like the title of the article. And I'm like, was it ever enough? Was it ever too much? Was it always too much? You know what I mean? Like, that is such a personalized question, right? If you have somebody who spends $200,000 a year just to live, let alone everything else they want to achieve in retirement, $1 million probably isn't enough, right? And it was never going to be enough for them, right? And I take umbrage with a lot of the philosophies of blanket recommendations, rules of thumb, right? I think tailoring identifying the probability of your success and executing a plan should be something that's much more personalized than a rule of thumb, right? Because a rule of thumb can get you into a lot of trouble one way or another, right? Again, if it's too much on the soft side, you might fall short, right? You might have those issues where you're running out of money, or you might be too strict with, and I've seen some plans and some social media style planning that is extremely restrictive and inefficient with their money, right? Sometimes it'll force them to have extremely aggressive saving strategies and do things that are inefficient with your money because it's X person's way, right? And I think ultimately people are taking blanket recommendations at the end of the day from unlicensed, unregistered people. So it's important for people to identify that their personal goals and evaluate their personal need, in their personal pathway towards how they envision success, which is ultimately one of the soft skills that we have to have, is helping our clients articulate what success looks like, particularly for retirement.
So here's a case in point of where that, to just justify what you're saying. We spoke about this on the show, so I'm not speaking out of school, with Stephanie. When she first came to me, because of her illness of her husband, and then after he passed, they had used most of what they had. And so she became a rabid saver. But because of all the turmoil in her life, she wanted almost no risk to her portfolio. And I had the conversation with her where I said, I need you to step outside your comfort zone, because I can't get you where you need to go and be that conservative to do it. And she trusted me. And what I told her is that comes with a heavy weight to me, because I know what I'm doing when I do that. Because when markets go up, if you're outside your comfort zone, nobody cares.
Yeah.
When markets go down and you're outside your comfort zone, that can create unnecessary anxiety for a client.
Yep.
Right. So we managed that close, so we just don't run for returns. But I had to kind of step on the gas pedal with both feet to make things work. Right.
Yeah.
And because of the private managers that we use, where we can have individual selection of the securities that they provide, that gives us more risk management. We can control the degree of risk within a portfolio, so that even though I took her outside her comfort zone, it was more conservative, but more heavily equity based, so that we could get her where she needed to go.
Right.
So.
Right. I think it's
You ain't gonna find that in no program there, son.
No, son. Of course not. Yeah, I think what ultimately you have to do is identify just kind of exactly what that was, is identify what the fear is with market corrections, right? Is the fear that your portfolio isn't going to be X dollars and Y cents, or is the fear that you're not going to have enough money to live and maintain your lifestyle? And that's something that I feel like every time we say that to a client, it's not every time, most of the time it seems like it's a glass shattering moment, where people are like, I don't want my principal. I don't want to lose the value of my principal. And you just say, why? Why? What does that matter? Why do you care? Right. And and when you get to the root of it, the fear isn't, that I'm scared that if I go below this, then something, they're afraid that they're going to run out of money. They're afraid that this is enough money to retire. And if they just have a snapshot of it, they don't need it to necessarily grow. And we, through our planning techniques and things like that, we showcase them what market risk can do for their success, how it is often necessary for their success, and and the drawbacks of being too conservative. A market correction is a lot less scary than being in cash for 30 years, right?
Right. And this was the point, I think, with Stephanie, that thorough planning brought something else to light. She's not a conservative investor. She had lost so much in her life, she didn't want to lose any more.
Yeah.
Which is different than being a conservative investor. And I was able to talk her through that and let her see that. And she's a bright individual. Mm-hmm. So she intellectually understood it, but emotionally she had so much that she had dealt with. She emotionally couldn't deal with one more at that time.
Yeah.
So the solution was to offload it to us and let us handle it.
Yeah. And that's one of our jobs, right? Is ultimately to take care of the portfolio, provide you with some upside, and certainly provide income, right? There's a portion of it that should be protected, and providing you with that income, and in most cases, not necessarily all cases, and certainly a portion that could either be legacy money or a bucket for down the road that we still can be a little more aggressive with. So that's all part of our plan design. And, I think the way people interact with the idea of risk is always informative of how we design a plan, not just the numbers. Right.
Right. Because at the end of the day, the last thing we do is build an investment proposal. That's one of the things that makes us different. That's till we get through this whole process of discovery. And the what's important to you process, and getting to understand what their hopes, dreams, and fears are. And then based on a rate of return we'll pick for their plan that has nothing to do with investments, just what we think is a reasonable return over time. And we'll tilt towards conservative because we don't want plans to fail, right? And then once we get to that point, and then once we have with the work we're doing along the way with the client involvement and engagement through that process, then we will circle back around and then begin to build a portfolio. But that's after we stress test the plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think I just to kind of go back to your point, I do think it is unique that the investments are the last part of our conversation. We see them as a vehicle for success. We see them as a vehicle for the client and what they're trying to achieve. And because of that, we should be as well informed as possible from a financial planning perspective on what we're going to do with the investments. I'm not going to sit here and say there's anything wrong with the other way or anything like that. This is just our philosophy, and we have conviction, of course, here at Gem Young that's the right thing to do things, and that's the way we do them. Even when I was in my CFP classes, I remember, and I really had a lot of respect for this guy. Very smart, very ethical, very good at what he does, runs an education program, a very successful practice. But I remember him telling this like gaudy story about how somebody closed an account on a golf course because he knew alternative minimum tax and the nuances of it and the ins and outs of it. And he would always say, putting assets on the books. And I was like, you didn't do anything really for that guy from a planning perspective. You closed a sale, right? You didn't provide holistic financial planning, holistic financial advice. You provided an optimization strategy, and he liked what you had to say. And that's just, I think that's just one of the things that make us unique. And certainly something that I've really bought into in my 7 years at this firm is that's one of our unique nuances, is that the investments are a vehicle for success. They're not, just invest with me because you invest with Steve or invest with Leo, right? Because I'll guide you on whatever nuances. Sure, we do that, but that's a component of a plan as always. And any optimization strategy is irrelevant if you don't have a holistic, overarching plan for a client.
And that's why everybody talks about rates of return, right? You've heard me say this a lot on the podcast of, when markets are up, people talk about the percentage return they got, and then when markets correct, they talk about the dollars they lost. Mm-hmm. Saying that to a client today, you got a kick out of it because it's a very intellectual client. That the funny part of the conversation was, I'm going in my mind, getting ready for the conversation. It's a client that only wants to meet over the phone. We've known him for 30 years. He's like, let's just do a phone.
Yeah.
So what I was going to talk about when we got to the investment portfolio, he had my conversation. I mean, he had the conversation I was going to have with him. He had with me.
Oh yeah.
That's how well versed he is with it.
Yeah.
And he was talking the same things. We had a good year last year, and he's got his own stock trading account of some stocks he bought, and he keeps it. We just keep an eye on it for him. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about, and there's some of the stocks in there are some well-named tech companies that have not done well this year, not done well for the last 2 or 3 months. So he was talking about the dollars he lost this year.
Yeah.
And even my point is I would call him a sophisticated investor.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of his knowledge and the level of conversations that we can have and all of that. And I was joking with him and giving him that same analysis that, for years you would talk about this one, I'm averaging whatever, 15% a year for 15 years on this stock is what my average return is.
Yeah.
And this time he told me the exact dollars that the stocks went down from their high.
Yeah.
So the point of that is the human condition, the human behavior that we all have.
Yeah, it's a very interesting psychological conundrum that our clients experience. And I don't think just our clients. I think any investor experiences, most experience that, right?
Right. That's my point. They do. Yeah. So, and navigating away from some of those is part of what helps our clients be successful. So when we go through those periods, it's a coaching opportunity for us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think, certainly some of what we do is, armchair life coach, armchair psychotherapist sometimes. And
it is.
Yeah, I know. And I've joked, but again, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here with the CFP, but they've expanded the last few years. I sat in 22, but a couple of years, let's say 2020-ish, they really started to expand behavioral finance. It's becoming a larger component in our industry. And you've been, bleeding edge and cutting edge of that, I should say, forever. Since 2018, I feel like you've been saying we do a lot of work in behavioral finance, right? And that's just becoming a larger and larger portion of, financial planning now, is understanding the human conditions, the biases, and many different things that an investor may bring to the table.
I've been doing it close to 20 years. And do you know why?
Because I've only been here since 2018. That's why I said that.
Well, I started doing it because it got to the point where building portfolios and managing money, after doing that for a couple of decades, I can kind of do it in my sleep.
Yeah. And
then I started saying, okay, there's got to be more. What are the triggers? What makes people behave the way they do? So it started more, instead of me wanting to be cutting edge, it was more of curiosity. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I got this down. I feel like I have this down to a science, right? And now I'm like, so what makes people tick? So I started going down that road. Why do they make the decisions they make? What's the trigger? When they're saying something to me, what are they really meaning when they say something to me?
Yeah.
And, that's what started leading me on to see that, I believe, I don't know whether it's true, but I believe all financial decisions are based and made with the emotional side of your brain. Mm-hmm. We go to great lengths to wrap logic around it. You've heard me say that before. Right. But there's that emotional component to it. So I try to get all the way back to that emotional component to see, okay, what was the trigger there? Mm-hmm. And that's where it led to the next step of being more holistic in financial planning. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, because back in the day, we all did the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Here's the plan. Here's the data. Here's the data overload we're going to give you. What do you think? Here's 2 thumbs up, right?
I've never done that. I've never data overloaded a client.
No.
It depends. You read their room. I always say that there's certain professions, like where they're going to want all the details, and certain professions where they're going to trust you a little bit more. Right. I think like a lot of the healthcare industry isn't like necessarily as well versed in finance. That's a conversation for another day, because I think basic level financial education needs to be more accessible in our country, particularly at the collegiate level. It should be a mandate, not an elective. It's a whole other sidebar I got to go on. But like I always say, like my engineer clients, they want my Excel spreadsheets. They want the details. They want to look, because they're numbers guys too. They're research guys too. Right. And they make a lot more, because what they do is so much more data driven than what maybe a nurse does. Of course, there's a metric crap ton of knowledge that goes into doing that, but what they actually do tangibly is so much more personal, right? The way they live and work is a very personal, heartfelt career, as opposed to maybe an engineer where things are extremely logically based.
Right.
So, those are just throwing out a couple examples, and not to overgeneralize, of course, just some of the things I've noticed, patterns that have persisted.
We'll get back more into that after the break. We'll get back into more of the individual behavior patterns and why we need to adapt with that as we go. But we'll be back after this break. This is Leo Daprile. This is the Gem Young Wealthcast. Back after this.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we make planning for your future simple by offering both insurance and wealth management under one roof. Our team helps protect what matters most while guiding you toward your financial goals, whether it's safeguarding your home, health, business, or planning for a work-optional lifestyle. With everything in one place, you get seamless support, personalized strategies, and peace of mind. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors at 330-533-7941 today to schedule your fit meeting and experience all-in-one protection and planning.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we know insurance can feel complicated and overwhelming. That's why our team is here to listen, understand your unique situation, and provide solutions that work for you. From home and auto to life, plus a team dedicated just to commercial insurance, we help protect what matters most without the stress. Don't wait until an issue arises. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors at 330-533-7941 to schedule your fit meeting and get the protection you need today.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we believe your financial goals deserve more than just a plan. They deserve a team. From planning for a work-optional lifestyle to managing risk and supporting your everyday needs. Our financial planners, paraplanners, and service team work together to build a strategy that truly fits your life. Planning for the future? We'll help you make that confident financial decisions and achieve lasting peace of mind. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors today, 330-533-6936, to schedule your fit meeting and start building your financial future.
Now, back to the Gem Young Wealthcast, brought to you by Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors. Once again, here's Leo Daprile.
Welcome back to the Gem Young Wealthcast. This is Leo Daprile. If you're just joining us, we are doing our recap of our client conversations this past month. We had Gary Wakeford on, Randy Reese, we had Stephanie Schuler on. 3 different clients, 3 different stages of life, 3 different goals and objectives, and we wanted to give you some real insight to what their lives are like, what their hopes and dreams are, what their anxieties are. So hopefully we're giving you a good perspective on hopefully making you feel a little bit more normal, but talking about how this all integrates as a firm. I have with me my son, Stephen, today. Hi, Stevie.
It's good to be back.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
You bet. One of the things that I think is one of our unique abilities is understanding how to work with people and everybody's unique, different goals, objectives, money, lifestyles, marital statuses, right, and all of that, and making things like that flow for that person and making it individualistic. And in the first part of the podcast, we talked more about the goal planning. We talked about what's important to you, but learning, and then towards the end of it, we got to the point of talking about the different personality types and different wants and needs of everybody. And that's why it's so hard to make this business a cookie cutter business. Many people try, and the problem I have with it is to fit in the cookie cutter molds, whether it be a financial plan or the out of the box investment solutions that we see. People, instead of saying that is or isn't for me, people tend to modify themselves to fit those products, which isn't something, obviously, we don't think is the right thing to do.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Again, that goes back to tailoring it, right? To tailoring your specific advice and finding something that is for you and not a general rule of thumb, of course. As I already voiced my disdain or displeasure with rules of thumb regarding something as big as retirement, right? Yeah.
Sure. So let's talk probability analysis for a minute, right? Because it's easy.
Get the popcorn.
I may go off on a tangent. You never know with me. But one of the problems with math is math itself. It's leads to a lot of assumptions and a lot of software packages that we see can paint a pretty picture, but it doesn't paint a realistic picture. It doesn't paint a real life picture. Let me say it that way. Okay. We try to put real life into what we do. So once we build out our plans, we do what's called a Monte Carlo simulation, where we take the client's wants and needs and we'll project over their lifetime. We'll pick 1,000 random periods of stock market performance to see the probability of success of what we're trying to do. And we'll typically use a rate of return of around 6%.
Depends. Yeah, it depends. We not exclusively. It all depends on the client's risk profile and current allocation.
Right. It could be more, it could be less.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rarely more from a compliance point of view, because
rarely
more because we think, if you look historically over time, to project rates of return higher than that, to give somebody what I'll say is the risk of a false sense of comfort,
right,
to using a rate of return too high. That's especially true, especially if you've performed extremely well, like we have for our clients over the last 3 years, where we've way overshot goals for clients.
Last 15 years,
Yeah, yeah, true, fair enough.
An all-time bull market we're on.
Right.
Discussion for maybe next month.
Yeah. But with that, but we don't. We always assume that we go back to norms. I think is my point.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, we never ratchet up that rate of return within a plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could, but that has been leading to a lot of other interesting conversations lately of legacy planning.
Yeah.
Where maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we weren't really having a lot of legacy planning conversations. But because of the success of our clients, this is more on the table. So
Right. Yeah, because that's where the bucket philosophy really gets, from an investment portfolio perspective, the bucket philosophy really gets kicked into high gear, because a portion of it is all of a sudden like, hey, we here's the plan, here's what the linear path would look like, here's what we're anticipating to be money that you're never going to spend, right? And that approximate dollar amount. It's time to start thinking about that as legacy money, right? Your kids' money, your grandkids' money, the charity you want to give to, the foundation's money, right? Because it's just, just not speaking in general terms, but we've seen this happen plenty of times where we know how you live. You've been retired for 4 or 5 years. You're not spending any more than you've spent before. Your spending patterns are super predictable. We have that baked into the plan, and you're not going to run out of money at this, with this current rate, right? And if that's the case, then we should start thinking about a portion of these assets being aggressive or just different, right? If you have a kid who's 40, right, and you're thinking about transferring your whole estate over to them, well, why don't you manage the portion that you're going to wind up giving to them anyway? Manage a portion of that like they're managing it, right? Like it's already their account, right? Do what's in their best interest because it's more than likely going to be theirs, right? Or start gifting it away sooner so you can see it while you're still here. And it's always a more fun conversation, I think. Clients like to have the legacy planning conversation. Even though estate planning and death planning is often hard to talk about, the legacy planning is kind of a success story, and you get to leave behind something and provide for a family member or family members or charities. So it's always a good conversation, and something, of course, certainly over the last few years or so, but with kind of having a really nice bull market, COVID aside, for about 15 years, that we're in really good position to start thinking this way, right?
So early in my career, I had a retired CPA as a client, and he had a certain chunk of money, and he goes, "This is my legacy money." So I'm like, okay, well, maybe we should invest it, conservatively, so it's there to pass on. He looks at me and goes, "Oh, no, you're not." He goes, "I want you to be as aggressive as you can." And I said, "Well, how come?" He goes, "I want to leave them a lot of money, and I want them to say, wow, that was really good of him."
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well, the liquidation isn't exactly at the time of your passing, right? The liquidation is when your heirs liquidate the money. And if that's the case and they're 40, that might not be, your life expectancy, say it's 7 years out, the estimated time to liquidate it is still 17 years maybe.
Well,
so
that's exactly this time frame.
Exactly.
This gentleman we invested the money when he was 75. That's why I said we should be more conservative.
Right.
And he goes, "Oh, no." He goes, "I want that pot as big as it can." He goes, "I want them to go, wow."
Mm-hmm.
And he lived till 92.
Oh, love that.
Mm-hmm. The interesting part about it, his beneficiaries, though, were in their late 60s. And they were like, "This is great, but what are we going to do with it?"
Yeah.
They were retired.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, it's not life-changing money when it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. Well, that was going on to the grandkids, so.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Those kids just downstreamed it to the next generation. So.
That's good. Yeah.
So, but back to plan rates of return. And where we two things I want to talk about: plan rate of return versus the actual rate of return, how we measure that again. And I want to go deeper because we haven't had this conversation in a while, the buckets. We talk about them a lot with our clients, and it's a great visual for how people can look at their life and look at their money. Because even if you're a more conservative investor, there's some money you may not need for 10 or 15, 20 years, and you shouldn't be conservative about that. But people tend to, and we see it a lot when we're bringing on new clients, and we're seeing that if they're a moderate investor, their entire portfolio is moderate, which is not something we agree with overall. I mean, we could have a moderate overall.
Holistic allocation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the way we shift it around based on where we put it in the bucket,
Mm-hmm.
right? So bucket one's normally that 0 to 2 year bucket.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bucket that we use a lot for people that tend to be more conservative, that have more angst about market performance.
Right.
So we keep enough money there for money they'll use for 2 years, and then playing the average game a little bit, right? The average when we go into a recession, we haven't had one in a while, but we always believe that we will go into one.
Of course.
And the average recession's 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we figure if we keep near cash investments for some of those clients in cash and we go into a recession, that's how we help them manage the anxiety.
Right.
So that's more a behavioral finance planning tool than it is just a financial planning strategy.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Okay. And then we have the second bucket, which goes from 2 to 3 years, maybe to 10,
Mm-hmm.
which is more aggressive than bucket one, but going to give a little stabler ride.
Mm-hmm.
And then bucket three, I'm oversimplifying the buckets because we have some clients who are so specific.
Yeah,
with
this
what
is
we-
general.
Yeah.
This is generally speaking, not again, not a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right. We've had some clients with up to 7 buckets
Right.
because they wanted things that specific,
Exactly.
which is okay.
Mhm.
Again, back to the personalization, right?
Exactly.
And then our position is if there's money we know with a high degree of certainty you're not going to need for at least 10 years, we're like, okay, we got to grow the pot,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's just a recap for listeners of the bucket theory. And that's a great visualization of how people can look at their money. And that's why there's not a lot of need to keep a lot of short-term money. So we take into account, because some people want 5,000 in their savings account. Some people want 100,000 in their savings account.
Yeah.
And that's the feel-good money.
Exactly. Exactly. I say all the time that, there is kind of a more mathematical, like you want a certain amount of monthly expenses covered in cash, and then anything above that is an inefficiency, and that's what the book tells me. But the practicality is it's stupid. I don't know what I came up with it, but the reality is everybody has a magic number, which is a crazy name for it. But pretty much all that means is the number that they need to have in cash to feel good, right? And I always try and coach clients to have their magic number be the rational magic number. But at the end of the day, people are people, and they've lived, especially soon to be currently retirees, have had that magic number in their head for 30 plus years, right? And that's going to be, it's hard to get people off that.
Yeah, I've learned in that case, again, back to the uniqueness, that when people go below that, they stress about it a lot for whatever reason. So I've learned through the years, I just tell them to keep it there just for their own peace of mind, because we can talk rates of return. And we were talking about in the top of the podcast that, it's really what makes people comfortable at the end is what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it being so personalized to them, we need to understand that nuance. And I never care what their magic number is unless it's going to affect the performance of the plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm a little bit more of the opinion that I'm gonna tell you if you're over allocated to cash or very under allocated, I'm probably gonna say something. Now remember I'm a financial planner. I advise. You don't always have to listen to me, and I usually couch it as such. But if you're looking for my opinion, and that's why you hired me, that's right. Here's what I would tell you. Here's what I would do if I was in your shoes. Here's what I should be telling you, right? And at the end of the day, the ball's in your court. I think couching it that way, but also, educating people on why it's rational to have the right amount of cash, empowers them to make that decision, with their eyes wide open.
So I talk a lot about goal rate of return for the plan and then actual investment performance. There's a reason I do that. One of the things that anybody with money is always watching some sort of program about how the market's doing that day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most people are going to be that way. And we often talk about the angst and the headline risk that goes along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is behavioral finance by saying if we know we have a certain rate of return that the plan needs to achieve for you to be successful, and if we benchmark the rate of returns we're providing you against that plan, then that takes the market noise out of it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I agree.
You know, our job is to make sure that our managers are performing and doing what they're doing in terms of their peer group. That's how we tell our clients. So as long as we're exceeding the plan rate of return, that's the only thing that should really be of importance. So that's what I want listeners to hear on that too. What are you benchmarking to?
Yeah.
And what's the relevance of what you're benchmarking to, right?
Completely agree. Completely agree. I think there's some portions of assets that you benchmark against indexes, but for the most part, no, you don't benchmark against indexes. You benchmark against what you're trying to achieve. And if I think the only exception to that rule is if it is the objective of the money is maximum growth. That's probably the only exception. Other than that, the reality is you put bonds in there, you put whatever, right? Something to reduce the risk other than, stocks itself, to have a rational rate of return. And that's a great point. I think that's important to bring up because that's something we talk about all the time with our clients.
All right. So if you're benchmarking yourself against, and if you're handling things yourself, and you're benchmarking yourself against the market or benchmarking your financial advisor against the market, my argument to that always is rarely have I seen a portfolio emulate an index.
Yeah.
So if they're not exactly the same, and they're close, and I hear this all the time, but it's close. So it should give you some indication of how we did. I said, and this is maybe where I have that engineer's mentality, but they're not exactly the same.
Yeah.
So if they're not exactly the same, you're not going to have exactly the same returns to benchmark, right? Like we talked about in the office last week, we were talking about how the pool of available securities has shrunk through the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the dates, so forgive me, but I'll give you the overall to it. I was talking to a client about this. I think it was Gary on the show, that back in the day, there was 8,000 stocks that qualified for the Russell 5000 index, for however many years that was. Today, there's only 3,400 stocks in the Russell 5000.
Mm-hmm.
That changes the risk profile to me.
Yeah.
That changes the return opportunities to me. So if you're benchmarking against an index like that, how relevant are you?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's going to provide more volatility. The law of large numbers, the more you have in there, the more smoothing there is going to be from a volatility and rate of return standpoint. The less you have, the more volatile it gets. Can outperform, can underperform. Likely will do both in spurts because of that. So that's why, being well diversified is also, super important. And just looking at the S&P 500 index, which is exclusively a large cap stock that looks at the top 500 market cap, again, stocks in the New York Stock Exchange can be a little misleading for what's in your portfolios because you don't have exclusively large cap stocks.
Right.
And the way that they're measured is a whole nother can of worms we don't got to get into, but it's not balanced out based on percent increase or decrease. It's balanced out based on size.
Yeah, and case in point with the S&P 500, there's been some of the Magnificent Seven stocks that have not had a good year, and they're negatively impacting the S&P 500, where they were a positive impact last year. So if you have a balanced portfolio that chooses to measure against it, are you better than it now?
Yeah,
because only a few of the stocks in the S&P 500 are not having a very good year.
yeah.
So
This is your last show of the month, right?
yeah.
This is a great segue into the quarterly market updates.
Oh, yeah.
Do you realize that?
I do.
This is a good segue. Yeah.
I got the crew coming in next month. Looking forward to it.
Good. Yeah. This is a very timely portion of this discussion as we flip the calendars to the next quarter and start peeling back the onions and seeing how I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say regarding those top end stocks and how the large caps have been performing. And one word I think you're going to hear from all those analysts is, it's two words, is market breadth.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's what's coming more and more. So we talked about this actually last October about some of these stocks priced to perfection. And I said then my fear was if they stub their toe, meaning they don't overperform if they barely meet expectations, that there would be a price correction. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, that's why we stay away from that noise. That's why we stay away from that as a financial planning firm, because that doesn't help everything work. That doesn't make the plan more successful. That's like you hear me say all the time, that's great cocktail party conversation, but that's not really what helps people get to their goals and their dreams, right?
Yeah.
So it was some interesting conversations that we've had along the way with all of that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. I always like when you have your clients on.
yeah. And it's funny that they still like us and come back.
Yeah, it's shocking, honestly. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that's one of the things we can promise you if you just choose to work with us here at Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors. I will promise you sarcasm.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Yeah. It's one of the few gifts that God gave me, and I decided to hone it, not run from it. So
yeah, there you go.
All right, Stevie, looks like we're just about out of time. So
yeah.
Appreciate you coming in today. Appreciate the insight and giving us more of the nuance of what really goes on behind the scenes so that we help our clients get to where they're going.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me back, as always.
You got it. Okay, this is Leo Daprile. This is the Gem Young Wealthcast. We'll be back after this break.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we know every financial journey is unique. That's why our team of financial planners, paraplanners, and service professionals work together to provide personalized strategies for a work-optional lifestyle, investments, and risk management. We're here to help you plan for today, protect tomorrow, and enjoy the life you've worked so hard for. Take the first step toward financial confidence. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors at 330-533-6936 to schedule your fit meeting today.
Hey, it's Medicare Jer here from Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors. Medicare can feel confusing, but I'm here to make it simple. With the right Medicare Advantage or supplement plan, you can worry less about unexpected healthcare costs and focus more on enjoying life. Let's make sure you've got the coverage that fits your needs and gives you peace of mind. Call me, Medicare Jer, at Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors today at 330-533-7941 to schedule your appointment, and let's get your plan in place.
By calling this number, you will be speaking to a licensed insurance agent to answer your questions or provide additional information about Medicare Advantage plans, prescription drug plans, or Medicare supplement insurance plans. This is an advertisement for insurance.
Now, back to the Gem Young Wealthcast, brought to you by Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors. Once again, here's Leo Daprile.
Welcome back to the Gem Young Wealthcast. This is Leo Daprile. Well, that was a good wrap for this month. I hope you gained some insight on the realities and the practicalities of what our clients experience. If you're someone that's already retired, I'm sure you can relate to a lot of this, the ups and downs of your life. And really, that's what this comes down to for us, is this is life. This is how you live. These are the things that you achieve. These are the pains that you go through. And it's all part of living. The money part of this whole thing, if you notice when we spoke with all of our clients this past month, we weren't sitting there pounding, for an hour on rates of return and all that other stuff. It's important. Don't misunderstand me. But the message there was they're achieving. They're reaching their goals. They're living the life that they're wanting to live. They're making changes to their life. If they're not happy with the way things are going, if things are not where they thought they would be, they are in a position to adapt. I think what's interesting about the three clients that we had on is, number one, their life stages are different. Number two, what they did in retirement, if you listen to what we talked about, nobody talked about money. They talked about their experiences, be it good or be it bad. They talked about their wants and their needs. They talked about challenges with spouses or challenges with life, without a spouse. All that goes into that. So again, this is true holistic financial planning from our point of view. The math, you've heard me say I've been doing this 40 years. I'm pretty good at that part of it and figuring that part out and knowing what works and what doesn't. But it's the soft side of this. It's the human side of it that really matters to you, because it's your life at the end of the day, and it's helping you achieve what it is you want to achieve. So, we take that very seriously, and we spend a lot of time helping you get to what that is. And they're great people. Like they're all of the folks we had on here are all big personality people. They're all intelligent people. From a purely intellectual point of view, they all have the capability to do what we do, but it's the nuance that we provide that takes them to another level that for many of them, they don't think about. And that's okay, because I've often say this, and I say this to my clients, no matter your level of intellect, it's extremely difficult for an individual to emotionally distance themselves from their life and distance themselves from their money to make the goals that they are. We have clients that are from many different professions. And again, many of them have the intellect and competence to do this, but they choose to live their life. They don't want to have to manage this anymore. And that's where we come in for a lot of them. You hear me talking today about a client, I call him a sophisticated investor, and he is. But when it comes down to it, his decisions are still somewhat emotional. And that's just the human condition. And these are the soft skills that we've spent decades honing in. And that's part of the reason our clients are so successful, because we know the level of sophistication that they need. We know where the nuances need to be. We know how to help them get to where it is they're trying to go. And it's just raw and real people that we had. So I'm sure a lot of you fit that profile, and hopefully that you were able to identify with someone during the past 3 shows and what it is their life's about, and maybe some of what your own personal struggles are. Just because we're all in this world together, we all have the same sort of wants, needs, and concerns. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed that. We are a podcast. Check us out anywhere that you do get a podcast. We are typically available right after the show. I appreciate you listening today. This is Leo Daprile. This is the Gem Young Wealthcast. Until next time.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we make planning for your future simple by offering both insurance and wealth management under one roof. Our team helps protect what matters most while guiding you toward your financial goals, whether it's safeguarding your home, health, business, or planning for a work-optional lifestyle. With everything in one place, you get seamless support, personalized strategies, and peace of mind. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors at 330-533-7941 today to schedule your fit meeting and experience all-in-one protection and planning.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we know insurance can feel complicated and overwhelming. That's why our team is here to listen, understand your unique situation, and provide solutions that work for you. From home and auto to life, plus a team dedicated just to commercial insurance, we help protect what matters most without the stress. Don't wait until an issue arises. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors at 330-533-7941 to schedule your fit meeting and get the protection you need today.
At Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors, we believe your financial goals deserve more than just a plan. They deserve a team. From planning for a work-optional lifestyle to managing risk and supporting your everyday needs. Our financial planners, paraplanners, and service team work together to build a strategy that truly fits your life. Planning for the future will help you make that confident financial decisions and achieve lasting peace of mind. Call Gem Young Insurance and Wealth Advisors today, 330-533-6936, to schedule your fit meeting and start building your financial future.
Join me every week where we talk anything and everything about your money. Have a topic you want to hear more about? Email Katie, that's Kayti, at gemyoung.com. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and the iHeartRadio apps. Until next time, this is Leo Daprile.